All right, let's talk about Space Marine 2. So first, let's clarify a few things, particularly where I'm coming at the game from. So I'm a big 40k fan. I've been playing Warhammer 40,000 for a long, long time, not actively playing it right now, but I started playing it in 3rd edition way back in sort of like, what was that, 2000? 1998, Google tells me. Jesus Christ, getting old. So yeah, played a lot of 40k, really love 40k. Love the game, love the lore in particular, a big story buff around that universe. And so I'm somebody who has been hanging out for a really good, like a great 40k game for a long time. We've had some good ones over the years, but I don't feel like we've ever gotten a game set in that universe that truly captures the look and feel of Warhammer 40,000. Even like, Dawn of War, if you go all the way back to Dawn of War, which I think is most people's sort of like staple as the Warhammer 40,000 video game, which is a fantastic RTS, love it a lot, one of my favorite games in that genre. But even that, I still don't feel like truly captured the vibe of 40k, right? And so everything I was seeing about Space Marine 2 looked like it was going to head in that direction. Looked like it was finally going to give me that game that I've been waiting for. Now, I also haven't played the first game. I didn't play the first Space Marine. When it came out, honestly, I just didn't think it looked that great. So it just looked, I don't know, fairly repetitive. Didn't have a lot of variety, I didn't feel, in its enemy design or gameplay. So I gave that one a miss when it came out. Again, disappointingly for me, I was really hoping that that one would be good, but it just didn't look like my personal cup of tea. But Space Marine 2 definitely did. It did look like it was going to give me what I've been waiting for, what I've been hoping for, and wanting to play for such a long time. Now, in terms of the gameplay that I've actually played, Steam tells me I've played about 12 hours of Space Marine 2. Not a lot. I've only finished the campaign. I played the first mission or two twice over with different groups of people, and played through the entire campaign in co-op with a buddy. I haven't played any operations. I haven't played any PvP. I've only played the story through, and that's what I'm sort of basing my thoughts and opinions on. I don't think that the PvP or operations are going to change my opinions that I've got here. So, take everything I say with a grain of salt, if you like, based on the fact that I've really only played through the campaign itself. All right, so Space Marine 2, third-person action combat game set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. I'm going to say straight away, I like the game. I really like it, actually. I think when I share my thoughts as I go through the notes that I've got written down here in front of me, the talking points I want to hit on, I think it's going to sound like I don't like the game, because I've got quite a few things about it that I dislike. More dislikes than likes. I think if I had to sort of, summarize my feelings on it, I find Space Marine 2 to be a frustrating game. Not just in aspects of how it plays, but because I feel like it's so close, man. Like it's so close to being really, really great. Like you can see it from here. You can see the greatness. You can see what this game could have been, and it just didn't quite reach it. It got close though, man. It's got close. It's made me really excited if they do like an expansion for Space Marine 2. If they do Space Marine 3 in the future, I'm sure this is done, obviously this is done quite well. It's been very popular. No doubt we're going to get a Space Marine 3 at some point down the track. I'm very, very excited to see what they do with that one, because I feel like this is, like Space Marine 2's gotten really, really close. But the frustrating part about it for me is it just didn't quite get there in a lot of ways, which I'm going to talk about now. So let's start with the things that I did like about the game. firstly, the look and feel of the game. I think they've gotten as close as anybody, or closer than anyone has before, in sort of nailing that 40k vibe that I was talking about. That the way things look, the environments, the detail in the environments, the detail on the battle barge, the way the Space Marine armor looks, the way the Tyranids look. It's just like everything's got this grandiosity to it, you know, this real epic kind of scale and scope. I kept describing it as like the game feels really cinematic, like the entire thing feels like this big, epic, sweeping action movie, you know, like a big, like Avengers Endgame style, you know, massive production kind of thing. It's got that feeling to it, you know, when you're standing and looking across at these massive vistas, these huge, you know, cannons that are aimed at into orbit to protect the planet, you know, and they're just massive. The scale of the buildings, like just the sense of scope and scale in the game, they've done really, really well. Like I loved just like walking out onto a battlefield and just seeing it all arrayed before you as these like waves of Tyranids just pour into these Cadian soldiers. And there's the gunfire going off and explosions going off. There's things flying around in the sky. There's like shells falling. That whole sense of like of cinema to the game is really, really cool, and I really, really like it. Especially, yeah, the attention to detail. You know, even though you've got this massive scale and massive scope, there's still so many wonderful little details in the environment. Right down to just the character models, the enemy models, things like that. You know, being a space marine and just feeling so much bigger and more powerful than the humans around you. You know, I remember like when I first started the game and I stood next to an Imperial Guard tank, and I was like, you know, taller than this tank. It's like, yes, I'm a fucking space marine, you know, and that's how it should be. And that was cool. The way, like when you're moving through those little loading gates where you have to like push the rubble out of the way, like hefting these massive pieces of concrete or metal, and just lobbing them to the side. You know, it does a good job in that respect of putting you into the shoes of the characters that you're playing. These Astartes, these superhuman soldiers. You know. The shooting mechanics, I really, really love the shooting in this game. And that's, I guess, one of my frustrations with it is that this is largely a melee-focused game. This is a close combat-focused game. For about 70 to 80% of this game, you're going to be swinging at things with a blade of some sort. And that, oh man, it just frustrated me because the shooting, it feels so good. It feels so punchy. The guns sound great. You can feel the impact of these explosive rounds just hitting the Tyranids as they swarm in. You know, when you get those headshots and their heads just explode in a shower of gore. When you like one shot all the little Hormagaunts that are running in. And they just, you know, a shower of viscera and they just pop like popcorn, you know, like you'd really feel like they did a great job of the bolt gun, of making the bolt gun and the bolt rifles feel like bolt guns, you know, these guns that are like half the size of a regular human just punching into these alien invaders. I loved it. I loved all the shooting in the game. Every opportunity I got to grab a gun and stand back and shoot things rather than get into melee, I took it because that was my favorite aspect. And it's, you know, it's obvious, I think, to look at this game and see, you know, see similarities to Gears of War, right? Like there's some definite, like they definitely share some DNA, but where I think Gears of War sort of steps it onto another level is in the cover-based shooting. Now, I understand that, you know, you're a fucking space, you're wearing the cover, you are the cover, and so that style of gameplay might not necessarily translate terribly well to the fiction of the universe, but I definitely noticed its exclusion, you know, like not being able to move from cover to cover. And I'm going to talk about this more shortly. But I felt like if only that was in the game, man, my enjoyment of it would skyrocket, and my enjoyment of the shooting mechanics, which I already love, would go through the roof because it would be a fantastic cover-based shooter. Speaking of shooting Tyranids, the Tyranids themselves were done so well. Like, I was a little bit, you know, cagey around the fact that they don't act the way that they do in the tabletop game, right? Like, you know, a single Space Marine cannot just wade into hundreds of Tyranid Hormagaunts and Gaunts and whatnot and just carve their, like, he would get eviscerated in the tabletop game. But I still loved the way that they did that. The swarming, like, sort of, it plays into the fiction of what the Tyranid is that you can't realistically, feasibly do physically on the tabletop, you know, not without buying hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of models. Like, I think they did a fantastic job of translating that, the feel of the Tyranids, more so than the direct mechanics of the Tyranids, into a digital space and giving you that sense of like this fucking horde of teeth and claws that is just pouring across this planet and devouring everything that it comes across. You know, it definitely played a lot more like the fiction that you read about the Tyranids, more so than the way the Tyranids actually physically play in the game. So yeah, props for that. I thought that was brilliant. And just seeing them, right? Like, you know, in the tutorial, at the end of the tutorial where you're standing atop that battlement and you're just watching like the wave of Tyranids just pour towards your battlement and file through inside and start to climb up the walls. And like, I know that's all cinema, like there's no actual real gameplay mechanics in that, but in terms of like setting a mood and setting an atmosphere and setting like a holy shit, like there are thousands, tens of thousands of these fucking things. We are so outnumbered, it's ridiculous. It gave a real good sense of that hopelessness that it is to stand against something like a Tyranid fleet, you know, a Tyranid hive fleet. So the Tyranid swarms, the way that they did those, again, largely for cinema, not a lot of gameplay application, but it nailed the feeling of what it's like to stand up against them, I think. So that was really, really, really well done. And great to see the campaign also fully playable in co-op. I know that's not a big deal these days, but it was so fun to experience this campaign with friends, with my friends who love this universe, who love this fiction, who've been playing the games with me for decades at this point. Being able to go through this together with them was really, really cool. I do wonder if you would get a better sense of the cinematic nature of it if you played solo. You know, like while you're playing with buddies, certainly while I was playing, we're talking shit, we're making jokes. We're totally like ruining the vibe of the game to some degree that it's trying to instill upon you. So I do wonder whether you would get a better sense of the campaign story, a better sense of the atmosphere of the game if you just played it through by yourself. But I had a blast playing it with friends, and I sort of go back and forwards. Like, would it be better to play co-op or better to play solo? I feel like it. Gameplay wise, it was probably better to play co-op, I think. Cinematic wise, I'm not sure, but I appreciate the fact that it was there. Any game that lets me co-op a campaign, I'm a big fan of, because that's how I like to play games, and I had a really, really good time doing that with this one. The weapon options. The weapon options were on point as well. Like all the war gear that you've seen available to the different units in the tabletop game, they were largely all there accounted for, and that was really, really cool to get to play with all these different toys. And like I said, the different bolt gun variations in particular, I think they did a really fucking good job on, because they just felt so good to use, so punchy. But you know, you also had the plasma incinerators, you had the melter guns, you had the flamers, you had the heavy bolters. Like, you know, you got to muck around with power swords and chain swords, thunderhammer, like all the toys. You had all the toys there that you had been using on the tabletop for quite a while now, and getting to see them translated into the digital space and see how they actually feel in a cinematic kind of way, in a gameplay way, as if they would, you know, as if you had gone down into the fiction, gone down into the tabletop level. That was particularly cool. And it was always fun, like coming across a new weapon and going, oh, plasma incinerator, got to give that a go. You know, I was always up for trying the new toy that they gave you that you hadn't seen before, just to see how does this feel? Because, you know, things like a melter gun, right? Like, melter guns, melter rifles, multi-melters, they've been around in the Warhammer 40,000 universe for as long as I've been fucking playing it, which is a long, long time now. But you've never really gotten the chance to see how they function in a sense of like you using it, like you being the character and using a multi-melter, using a plasma incinerator. What do these things actually feel like? Because that sort of thing is really hard to pass and translate when you're playing it as a bunch of models on a tabletop, right? Like it's just rolling dice and doing wounds and taking damage and killing models. But how does it feel to use these weapons? And I think they did an amazing job of giving us that and showing us what these weapons actually feel like. Not all of them, mind you. I have some gripes with some of them, which I'll talk about shortly. But for the most part, they did well. All right, let's talk about some things that I felt could be improved on, or that they just didn't resonate with me. Things that I came away, you know, with them sort of stuck in my mind as like these, man, if only. And there's, you know, like I said, there's more of these than there are likes. So we'll get crack on into them. We'll get started. So firstly, the big cardinal sin for me, and especially with the way that I play video games, was the checkpoint and save system. But not only the checkpoint and save system, but the checkpoint and save system combined with really long missions, really long levels. There's no real clear indicator of when in a mission you're hitting a checkpoint. Like there's no little that I saw that I paid attention to. Maybe it was there and I just missed it, but I don't think so. There's no little like icon that shows up to say like checkpoint reached or whatever. Like when you play things like Halo, it's super obvious. Like it comes up right there, top of the screen, checkpoint reached, checkpoint whatever. And you know, like, okay, great. If we fail from here on in, if I die from here on in, this is where I'm going to be restarting from. I didn't see any indication of that in Space Marine 2. And for a game that's made now, like fucking how old is Halo? You know, we're talking about like a 25 plus year old game at this point, aren't we? Like, what was that, 2001? So about nearly 25 years old. And you know, certainly games before that as well. But that's the one that comes to mind as being like really clear and obvious and a well implemented checkpoint system. For us to be that far past that point of time in video games and to stumble over something like communicating where checkpoints are, I mean, that's just not fucking good enough, is it? Really? Like that's a big dropped ball. And not only that, but I felt like the checkpoints were really sparse. It wasn't as egregious as other games that I've played, but I just feel like, you know, there were certain missions where they were like multi-staged, right? Like you had to survive, you know, a wave of things and then do a thing and then a wave of things and then do a thing and then a wave of things. But if you died on the third wave of things, it would put you right back to the start of that section to do the whole lot again, rather than just say starting from that wave, the beginning of that wave or something along those lines. Things like that really annoy me because they waste my time. And I don't have a lot of time to play video games these days, you know. That got irritating. It didn't happen often. Thankfully, you know, like I was playing with much more skilled people than me who managed to carry me along quite well. But when it did happen, it was certainly, yeah, very frustrating. And not just for me, echoed by the other people I was playing with as well. But even more frustrating was than that, I should say, is the lack of drop-in, drop-out multiplayer. Like, the story accommodates a three-person squad of Marines, right? Like the two offsiders, you've got Titus and you've got your two offsiders. They are integrated into the narrative of the campaign. They are always there. Why can't one of my friends just jump in mid-level and take control of one of those Marines, and then if he has to leave, jump out and we just continue on? I don't really understand that. I don't understand why we have to go back to the battle barge and start a mission all over again if I want to play co-op with a friend. It's just such a huge oversight to me, or it feels like such a huge oversight to me. And the most frustrating part about this particular point is that I was playing through a co-op mission with a friend of mine, and his internet, he was hosting, his internet connection shut itself and dropped out. And rather than us both being able to just load back into the mission of where we were up to, we were in like the very tail end of this mission. You know, we'd been playing for an hour at this point. He dropped it. When he came back in, loaded into the last checkpoint. I couldn't get back in because there's no drop in, drop out multiplayer. So I couldn't do the rest of that mission. If we were going to do that mission again together, we would have had to start all over again from the beginning of that level. That's crazy. That's crazy to me. So yeah, big swing and a miss on that one. And again, like instances like that are really frustrating because once again, they feel like they waste your time. Or that's how I felt, right? And they just, there's so many games that do this now. There's so many games that have got frequent checkpoints that have drop in, drop out multiplayer. It's like you wouldn't even have to load new models into the game because the two offsiders are already there, just AI controlled, It's not even like you're suddenly dropping a Marine in there that wasn't there before. They're already there. You're just passing control from the AI to a player who comes in. Yeah, I don't get that at all. It was very, very frustrating. So I've talked about the shooting and how the shooting feels fucking great. I love the shooting in this game. I cannot say the same for the close combat, for the melee. The parry system. Equally frustrating. I didn't have a problem nailing it with the smaller stuff. I could parry the gaunts when you got the prompts of them jumping in. You could catch them and smash them on the ground. Brilliant. Executions, by the way. Love the executions. Big ups to that. But trying to parry the bigger stuff, the timing just seems all over the place. It was so much easier to, well, I say it was so much easier to dodge. The dodge mechanic is pretty shit as well, to be fair. So, man, yeah, so many flubs on the parry against like warriors and bigger. They want you to fight these things up close, and that just wasn't as fun as shooting them for me. You die quite quickly, even on the lower difficulties. We were just playing on normal. We were playing on whatever the next one up from normal is, veteran, I think. And we were just getting smashed, man. Like we got to a point where we just hit a wall and it was like, how is this even fucking possible? So we rolled it down, managed to move on. But even on normal difficulty, like you're getting swarmed by these fucking things. You're getting like stun locked, repeatedly staggered, knocked on your ass. You don't seem to need to take a lot of damage. Like everything seems to hurt and hit you like a truck, which again, I get it. They're Tyranids. Like that translates fairly well to the tabletop memories I have of playing Tyranids like back in the day. But it all just kind of like combined to make you not really feel like a Space Marine, like what we know as a Space Marine. And I think when you don't feel like the character that is trying to portray you as, that ruins the immersion significantly, I think. Like if I'm playing a Space Marine, but I feel like I'm wearing tissue paper and that I get sat on my ass from, any old thing, you just, there's like what's the word for it, the term? Is it ludonarrative dissonance? Is that the word? That's the buzz term? Where like the fiction that it's selling you doesn't match the actual experience that you're having. There's that dissonance there. And I certainly felt that a lot playing this game, where the game was presenting you and building you up as this big fuck off Space Marine, this big epic hard ass. And then like you just get obliterated and not feel like you're doing any damage to things. And what, like, would it be, I think about whether, like, because Elden Ring have, like, health bars on enemies, and I think about, like, would it be better to have health bars on the bigger stuff, like Tyranid Warriors, to at least give you that sense that you are dealing damage? But I don't think that's needed, honestly. Like, even in things like Monster Hunter, you can stagger the monsters, they get crippled, they start to limp, they lose tails, you can cut pieces off them, they run away. And I get why Tyranids, they're not going to run away. I understand that. But there are ways to communicate to the player that you are dealing damage to your enemy without necessarily resorting to a health bar above their head. Some of those, I would like to see some of those things. It all sort of like amalgamated into us not really feeling like a Space Marine. And my friend Gary, when we were playing, he was the first one to bring this up. He was like, I don't feel like an Astartes, you know, like I just feel like a bitch, you know. It's like, yeah, man, I get it. And there are those moments where you're just wading through the gaunts, and they do a good job there of like making you feel like an absolute badass. But then anything that's above a gaunt just seems to absolutely roll over the top of you with no problems at all. All right, now I'm going to try and avoid spoilers. You probably see like a lot of the footage that I'm showing you is stuff from the very beginning of the game, the very first few missions, just in case you're watching this and you just want some opinions and you don't necessarily want the story spoiled for you. I'm going to do my best to talk around that. But I am going to talk about some things that happen at the end of the game. So if you don't want any of those spoilers at all, I don't know, block your ears, click ahead, go and watch something else. I don't know. There's stuff there that I want to talk about. I'll try to be as spoiler free as possible. I'll try not to ruin any narrative beats or anything like that. Having said that, I mean, if you've seen footage of the game anywhere, you know that at some point chaos shows up. Now, like a Chaos Space Marine. When you think about what is that? What is a Chaos Space Marine? So this is a 10,000-year-old just embodiment of hate and fury encased in like battle-scarred ancient armor that's there to basically match you beat for beat. You know, it's like the Shadow Link to Link, essentially. Man, we were carving our way through these dudes like nobody's business. So they didn't present the type of challenge I think that I was expecting. You know, and again, that really juxtaposed how much trouble we were having with some of the Tyranid enemies, that we were able to just chomp our way through Chaos Space Marines like nobody's business. I love the faction that they chose to put in the game. It's one of my favorite Chaos Space Marine factions. But to me, they came across like really cartoony. I don't know if it was just the look. They just didn't like the way they show the Ultramarines. I think was quite good. That their armor, you can tell, is really old. It's battle scarred. It's got nicks and chips and scratches and rents cut out of it. But that wasn't the case with the Chaos Marines. And the Chaos Marines are like, you know, everyone's like, Titus is 200 years old, who are like the fucking Chaos Marines, man, have been around for millennia. They should look like that, I think, anyway. Like you should get that sense of like you're fighting something from just another time that has just outlived so much, because it lives in a place where time is nothing. There is no such thing. But they just look like, they kind of look like toys, I'm going to be honest. To me, they look like action figures, and I didn't like that at all. Like, they look shiny and clean, and like they'd just been pulled out of a card, out of a box on a Toy World store shelf or something. I don't know. So that was a bit disappointing for me. And that cartoony nature to them, like, they never presented themselves as being truly terrifying and scary. Like the Tyranids, I think, did a much better job of that. But the main villain of the story was such a Saturday morning cartoon villain. Like, oh my God, he was so about as unscary as it's possible to be. I think they swung and missed on him so hard. For me, anyway. Even in like the context of the world that you're in the game space that you've been playing in, he still like stood out like a sore thumb as being like this mustache twirling, like fucking Skeletor-esque, you know, like this fucking, you know what I mean? Like, just like, oh, just the dialogue was so bad. The voice acting hammed it up so much. The way he looked, he just looked like a really cleanly painted miniature animated. He didn't look or sound or act scary or intimidating or terrifying or anything at all. He was just kind of laughable, I think. And that was so disappointing because he's like the main baddie, right? And it's like, oh, come on. Like, like that pulled me so far out of the vibe of the 40K universe. You know, like when you go and look at the art, like some of John Blanche or any of the artists that do that beautiful black and white ink drawings of the 40K universe and how grimy and gritty and dirty and just fucked it all looks. And then you look at like this guy. It's like, what are we doing here? You know, like what is going on? These two things don't go together. These two things don't match, and they don't even match the world that you've presented in your own game, you know, as this like helpless, overwhelming, grimy, you know, fighting this enemy that we can't possibly defeat kind of feeling. And then you've got like fucking Skeletor shows up, cackles about how you'll never defeat his plan before he vanishes. It's like, oh man, it was so bad. I thought it was so bad. Yeah, it was so immersion breaking and so non 40K. I think the campaign on the whole was fairly good. I mean, it wasn't like, it didn't blow my head off or anything like that. There is a moment in the campaign that was like, holy shit, that's pretty cool, that I wasn't expecting. I wish they had done more with it. They didn't really do anything with it. It just kind of like was a thing that sat there in the background. It was a really cool thing. I hope we delve into it a bit more in a DLC or something in the future. That'd be really good for them to experiment with that and play with that and let us play with it. But it was just a background, more of a background detail to other things going on. But man, the further the campaign gets, the more and more like Saturday morning cartoon it kind of becomes, until like when you get to the ending, we're just like fucking, we're throwing everything in the kitchen sink into this game. Like anything, like we've jumped the shark. The shark is not even in the fucking ocean anymore. Like we're so far past the shark at this point. And it's just like, and I get it. It's Warhammer 40,000, right? Like it's kind of silly by nature of what it is, but I guess it doesn't present itself that way. Like Warhammer 40K is not a tongue-in-cheek, wink wink, break the fourth wall kind of property. It is a grim, dark, teenage boy fantasy kind of world, right? And again, like you've got this villain that just doesn't jive with that at all, and then you've got this ending, I feel, that just didn't also stick with that whatsoever, because you just end up doing some kind of ludicrous things, and you like there's color and noise, and anyway, I'll try not to spoil the narrative of it here. When you play it, you'll see what I mean if you haven't played it already. If you have played it already, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I didn't love the way the campaign ended up. For me anyway. It lost all feel and vibe of what it was trying to build in like the first sort of like handful of levels of the game. This like real grimy, gritty, down grounded shooter action game. And then where it ended is like it couldn't be further from that, I don't think, anyway. Narratively speaking, tone-wise, vibe, it really just went off the deep end, for me. I keep saying for me. Obviously, these are all my own opinions and thoughts, okay? Opinions aren't facts. If you disagree and you loved it, hey, that's great. I'm very jealous of you. Right, let's talk about some mechanical stuff with the weapons of the game. I love, so I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here because I love the shooting, I love the weapon variety, I love that they gave you the opportunity to play with the different toys in the toolkit, to see what they look like, to see how they felt, how they sounded. That was all really great. The reality I found of the weapon array is that there wasn't a huge difference in what you used, really. I'll give you an example. A plasma pistol. In the tabletop game, that thing fucking shreds stuff, right? Like it is like, it cuts through armor like butter. Same with the plasma incinerator, even more, right? These are just like insta-kill weapons. The multi-rifle, the multi-melter, but the plasma ones are the ones I really noticed it on in the game, where I couldn't really tell much of a difference between using a plasma incinerator and using the standard bolt gun, or the standard bolt pistol and a plasma pistol. Maybe I'm just an idiot. I'm happy to admit that if that's the case. I mean, I know it's the case, but on this particular point, when you're sitting there with a plasma incinerator and just pounding like shot into a heavily armored enemy, like a Chaos Space Marine, like that's a one-hit kill weapon on a Chaos Space Marine. And it just was like, why am I using this fucking thing? Like, I'd rather just use the more rapid fire bolt gun. And that's what I ended up doing, because it didn't feel, again, it was that dissonance. There was that dissonance of, here's what we're telling you this thing is, but here's how it physically and mechanically works. And they don't match. They don't go together. It was another instance of that, a lot of instances of that with the weapons, to the point where I felt it didn't really make a big difference what fucking weapon you took. The swords as well, like the chain sword versus the power sword, there was like, it's basically the same thing. They function essentially the same way. They deal about as much damage as each other. A power sword in the fiction of 40k is like a fucking lightsaber. It like cuts through anything. It's like, again, another like insta-kill kind of weapon. Why am I wailing on a fucking Tyranid warrior over and over and over again, getting no feedback, getting no indication that I'm hitting him or hurting him in any way, with a power sword? I don't get it. Why? It's just, it was, again, I keep using the word, it was frustrating. It was frustrating because they look great. They sound great. They feel like, you know, again, the guns feel great, but they may as well have just put like 3 guns in the game, I think. You know, like you had variants of the different bolt guns. You had the, you know, the regular bolt gun, the long range sniper bolt gun, the short range but inaccurate rapid fire bolt gun. And then they just carry that archetype over the entire weapon array, basically. And none of them really felt any different from any other, to me. So yeah, but, man, the chainsword and the power sword especially was like, what is going on here? The Thunderhammer felt different, granted, that was good. I liked how that, you know, I didn't like using it, but I liked that it felt different from the others. But, man, yeah, they needed to do more to distinguish them apart, I think. Some of the boss fights were a bit odd, I felt, because it's like they were trying to create a Dark Souls style boss fight, but they didn't give you the Dark Souls controls or mechanics to engage with it. It gave you the Space Marine 2 mechanics to engage in this Dark Souls style or Elden Ring style boss fight. And so they just kind of felt messy and sloppy. A lot of just like swinging wildly. The dodge mechanic, like I said, is nothing like the dodge mechanic in Elden Ring, which is so good, so precise, so on point. The Space Marine 2 dodge is like more of like a side hop. Yes, you can do a roll, but it's slow and sluggish. And yeah, okay, it's a Space Marine. I get it. He's a big armored tank man, but like if you know anything about Space Marines, if you read the fiction, like this armor is not an encumbrance to these guys. Like it is full of servos and pistons. They themselves are absolutely like Captain America's, each and every one of them. Like a Space Marine fully armored can just like run, you know, faster than a dude on a motorbike sort of thing. Like you shouldn't feel sluggish as a Space Marine, I don't think. But you just kind of did. And when you marry those mechanics again with the system of they can hit me and it feels like they hit me, but when I hit them, I don't get the feeling I'm doing anything to them at all. I didn't enjoy the boss fights. They just didn't like what they wanted them to do, and the mechanics of the game just sort of like butted up against each other. Now this one, I don't know if this is just me. Like it felt like this was like, again, it was echoed by the people I played it with, so okay, I guess it's not just me, but you know when you can go on the battle barge and like choose your loadout that you can take down to the surface of the planet or into the mission. Did anyone else feel like that was just fucking pointless? Like, 2 minutes after getting into the mission, there's a fucking pod full of weapons for you to chop and change out of. What's the point of customizing your loadout on the barge? You know, like, it was just we ended up doing it twice and then catching on like, this is just a fucking waste of time. And then we just ignored it and just dropped down to the surface because we knew in 60 to 100 seconds we were going to have a different gun anyway. Just weird. Like, I would way rather have cut the weapon drops in the game by like 90%. Like, have weapons on the surface be actually really rare and put way more significance on how you kit yourself out before you go on the mission. That would have felt so cool, so much better than kit yourself out, but also here's all the fucking weapons that have ever existed in Warhammer 40,000. Have you shot at it? Pick them. It just didn't seem to matter. Like, we ended up just running past weapon drops because it was like they were so frequent and so everywhere that they just lost all meaning. They just lost all impact. I don't know if that's the case in Operations. Like I said, I haven't played Operations. Maybe your customization at the start, your weapon loadout at the start of the game means a lot more than when you go into it. And if that's the case, then I definitely need to play Operations because I think that would change the feel of that part of the game so much. And I'll get a lot more enjoyment out of it myself. But yeah, get rid of them. Just get rid of the fucking weapon drops on the planet or cut them significantly. Offer a cool toy here or there, you know, Zelda style almost before you need it. Like giving you the flamer before you run into the Ripper Swarms, for example. Just do that. Don't give us these like drop pods of like, here's 4 different weapons you can now change and chop between. Because then it's like, well, who cares? When you get so much of a thing, it's like, well, who cares anymore? It's like Diablo 3 loot at that point. It's like they're just colored words. They don't mean anything. I know there's a horde mode coming for the game. This game's begging for a horde mode, man. This should have had a horde mode at launch. There's no question that this should have had a horde mode at launch. Like that's like, it's the way the game works. Even the enemies that you're fighting, the Tyranids, like the overwhelming swarms of the Tyranid. Why was that not prioritized as a launch feature? Like, that's coming in like what, a year? In a year's time, they're going to release like a piece of this game that the entire mechanics of the game seem to be based around engaging with. Fuck, I'm going to be long gone in a year's time. You know what I mean? Like, that's so frustrating to know that it's not that they didn't put a horde mode in. It's that they knew a horde mode would be good, has started development on one, but didn't prioritize it enough to put it in the actual base game. Like, I would way rather have had a horde mode than PvP with these mechanics. Like, these are not great PvP mechanics, you know. Like, I haven't played PvP because I've just got no real interest in it after playing the campaign and seeing like the lack of feedback in the combat. I just don't, the no cover mechanics. Like, I don't see how this is going to be a super fun PvP game. Again, maybe I'm wrong. Happy to be proven wrong. I would much rather have the horde mode being there instead of that. Like, because it just fits. It fits so well. It fits the theme. It fits the mechanics. It fits everything. Where is it? Why is it not here? That's crazy to me. That's crazy. A couple of last points here. Just the fairly minor little things, like the Space Marine bickering in the story. Give me a break, man. Like, it wouldn't happen. It would never happen. Like, Space Marines are basically fucking just robots. They're like wholly emotionless, you know, automatons to us. Like, they're these child soldiers, indoctrinated child soldiers that have had all of that scrubbed out of them. And yet these guys are sitting there like getting into pissing matches and fucking like bickering and arguing with each other like children. And it's like, are you serious? No. You know what I'd love to see, actually, is I'd love to see a DLC for this game from the Imperial Guard point of view. If you got to play Acadian, if they want to do those kinds of interrelationship sort of stuff. And this is why I think it's really hard to make a game about Space Marines, because they are so far removed from you and I. Like, it's really hard narratively and lore-wise to relate to a space marine, because they're basically, they're not human anymore, and they don't even consider themselves to be human anymore. They are better than humanity, and they know it. And so seeing them like squabble with each other, it's like arguing with their superiors, arguing with the commanders. It just would never happen. Not in modern 40k. You know, this is like Horus Heresy era stuff. If you're familiar with the in deep lore, well, that's not very in deep lore. If you played 40k or know anything about 40k, you probably know that the Horus Heresy. Back then, they were much more human. They did squabble. They did fight. They did argue with each other. They did get into scuffs. They got into the ultimate scuff, as it turns out. But they carried on a lot more like what we're presented now with Titus and his buddies in this game. But modern 40k, modern Space Marines, 10,000 years past that point, nah, I don't buy it, man. I don't buy it for a second that we would get. I don't buy it for a second that they would turn on each other as quickly and easily, or even resort to petty nonsense. You know, like if old mate says, hey, he's now in charge, he's the lieutenant, he's in charge of your squad, they would be like, okay. And they would follow that order to their death. And that's how it would be. And again, I get that doesn't make like a super relatable story or super relatable character, but that's Space Marines, right? If that's the story you want to tell, make an Imperial Guard game. I'd love an Imperial Guard game. I think that would be so good. That'd be so cool to play as the Cadians or something like that. And give us all that human emotion and that human squabbling and all those human characteristics. But don't put it on the Space Marines, man. It just doesn't match. It doesn't go. It's that, I keep saying it, it's that dissonance again. You're selling me something, but you're telling me something is this, and then you're giving me that. And they aren't the same thing. Look, that's probably about it. Like I said, I've gone through a lot of dislikes here. It's I found the gameplay fairly repetitive as well. There's not a lot of variance in what you're doing, mission to mission, moment to moment. It all feels very samey, like very quickly, especially to me. And I've said this before, I hate doing the same thing over and over and over again in games. It just sort of like drives me a little bit nuts. I need new input and new feedback. You get to a point where you fight a lictor. That is cool because it's now you're fighting something that behaves differently, that does things differently. So when those instances came up, that was cool. I enjoyed that. But largely, you're going to be mashing your melee attack button for a very, very, very long time. And I'm a Diablo fan, right? But yeah, look, like I said, I sound like I'm being really harsh or that I dislike the game. I don't dislike the game. I had a good time with it. I did enjoy it. If they brought out DLC, I'd be keen to play it. I'm keen to try out Operations. If they bring out a Space Marine 3, I'll be right there to try it because I think I can see where they're trying to go. I can see that they're trying to get to, like, I can see my perfect 40k game sort of like just past here somewhere. You know, if I just squint a bit, there's a really fucking good, awesome, epic 40k game just beyond the horizon of Space Marine 2. They just need to work out some of these kinks, I think. And I think they're all fairly easily fixable things. You know, I'm not a game developer, but what I'm complaining about here is stuff like, you know, just better writing, just mechanics that are already in a lot of other games and have been for like a fucking decade or more, you know, even longer in some cases with checkpoints, you know. Like the stuff that I have gripes with are just frustrating because they shouldn't be gripes in a modern game now, you know. I don't think anyway. But, you know, credit where credit's due. It is one of the better 40k games that I've played, certainly in a long, long time, certainly since Dawn of War came out all those years ago. If you are a 40k fan, would I recommend it? Yes, with the caveat that, you know, just sort of temper your expectations. If you try and enjoy it for what it is. Like I said, I've put a dozen hours into it now. I'll play a couple of Operations and then I'll probably be done with it. This is not a game that I'm going to play for months and months and months. Very few games are with me. But I feel like, you know, the fact that I got to digest what it had to offer in 12 hours, I feel good about that. You know, like I don't want an 80-hour, 120-hour plus game because I'm just never going to, like, they just intimidate the shit out of me because I don't have the time. I don't have the time to dedicate to games like that. So being able to actually start, play and finish the main campaign of a video game with some friends, for me, is fantastic. Like, that's like 2 thumbs up straight away just for that on its own. But yeah, that's what I think about Space Marine 2. Have you played Space Marine 2? Did you enjoy it, not enjoy it? Did any of the things I say here resonate with you? Make sure you drop down and leave me a comment and share your thoughts with us. I'd love to check them out. But otherwise, that's going to be it from me for today, my friends. Thank you so much for watching. My name's been Jamie Dean, and as always, keep on side-scrolling. Ta-da!